Hey everybody. Well, I hope you had a great weekend. I don't know what it's like where you are, but where I am, it's been just about every day, like thunderstorms, lightning. I've seen some incredible lightning bolts, like big thick ones, coming all the way down to the ground. And we've got a cat who's afraid of thunder and loud noises, and he spends most of his time behind the toilet in the bathroom. Poor little thing. These days, every day, we've got like this electrical energy in the air. And anyway, I don't know, pretty interesting times. So I want to talk today about something that I think a lot of us are feeling, whether you've been in the awakening community for years or you're just starting to wake up now, you're just starting to open your eyes to what's going on around now. And that is the noise. Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so much coming at us. So many voices, so many narratives, so many channels and channelers and whistleblowers and influencers and AI-generated YouTube channels and Telegram drops and galactic updates and intel reports from the white hats. And it's just like so much coming at us all the time. And I've noticed that when things get this loud, this convoluted, this layered, there's this kind of frantic feeling that can come up like, who do I listen to? Where do I go? Who's got the truth? And that's actually a signal not to try to enter the complexity to figure everything out with your mind, but to take a long view, a 40,000 foot view or a view from, the moon or someplace really far away, and come back to the basics. Simplicity is a hallmark of truth. Okay? Truth is never like super complicated and convoluted, right? Complexity can exist in truth, but it doesn't have to be. Truth is simple, So that's what I always come back to. If I start to be like, I just feel like the water's coming up to my chin, and I'm drowning because there's so much information and so much. And listen, I what I do is I spend time kind of hopping around and listening to all of these different voices and all of these, sort of well-recognized people in different parts of this map of madness that we're currently navigating. Not to believe in anybody. I just listen because I like to hear the different points of view. I like to hear where people are coming from. And I take a stance of kind of sitting back, and and listening and I like to hold things in abeyance, right? I hold things for putting together pieces of the puzzle without, committing to any, I'm not there to believe anybody. I'm just there to listen. So I want to just name kind of the basic factions or sections or layers or pieces of the pie of what's out there. And I'm not dismissing how complex all of this has become, but you've got certain recognizable areas. Let's say, you've got the spiritual galactic world of information, and that's like channelers receiving transmissions from this collective or that ascended master or this ET race, or, you've got the sort of truther patriot world of Q, whatever, the white hats, military intel drops, secret space program insiders. You've got the sort of official disclosure adjacent mainstream content, such as it is. You've got inner earth beings and sea-dwelling civilizations and off-planet programs and Stargate hijacks and backroom treaties between governments and this ET or that ET faction, and multiple ET races with very different agendas and almost zero public education about any of it. Okay? I mean, then you've got psyops running through all of it. Handlers, agendas, channelers who may be genuinely receiving, or they may be V2K'd by some intelligence agency without knowing it. You've got information that may be like 70% true-ish and 30% steered agenda. You've got people parroting each other rather than, tuning into their own direct knowing about things. I mean, this is like the astral circus plus the insanity of the world stage, in a cocktail that is dizzying. And of course, it's not accidental, because confusion is a control mechanism, isn't it? I mean, an overwhelmed mind dissociates or goes into denial or defaults to authority. So, and there are plenty of authorities, human and otherwise, happy to step into that vacuum when you're overwhelmed. And so, why is this so hard? Well, I mean, I've talked about this before, but a lot of it is because we're missing so much context. I mean, that makes it genuinely difficult. We have almost no accurate information about our true history. And when we think, if whatever we think we know about human civilization, where we came from and who's been interacting with us and for how long and why, is a fraction of a fraction of the actual picture. And then much of what we do have has been filtered and distorted and, deliberately seeded by factions with an agenda. So, that's why you've got so many people obsessed with like Tartaria and mud floods and when the clones came in and all of this stuff, and then there's the flat earthers and then there's the ice wall and there's all of these different theories, people attempting to understand this world. We have very, very little actual reliable information, and then we have even less reliable information about galactic history. I mean, that's a whole other thing, right? The scale of what has been playing out, not just on this planet, but across the galaxy and over time scales that absolutely dwarf recorded human history. And that's a laugh. I mean, it's genuinely staggering. And underneath it all, we've got this population, we who have been attempting to navigate this, a population that has been deliberately suppressed and dumbed down and poisoned and mind controlled and cut off from their source connection and kept in an amnesic fog, specifically so that the extraction could continue here without resistance. All right, and we'll talk about that. So when someone who is newly waking up in the middle of this insanity feels overwhelmed and confused, well, it's no wonder. I mean, it's not a personal failing. And even people who have been in the awakened, or, we could say part of the awakened collective, or, you don't just get awakened and then you're done. You're always, we're always going deeper into the layers and getting, deeper into ourselves, who we are, because this is all, an expression of us somewhere deep down, right? Even those of us who have been in this for some time, or people who are, well versed in all of the disclosure vocabulary and the communities of disclosure and all of that, it's easy to get overwhelmed here too. You don't always see what you don't see. We're all learning. And, that's the intended result of a system that's designed to prevent exactly this moment of awakening, or to put it off as much as possible, or to, hang on as long as possible. Because once the awakening reaches a certain level, the party is over for the controllers and there's no more food source, right? So that's why they're, hanging on and doing whatever they can to scuttle the awakening, which it's not going to happen because it can't be stopped. But so here's where I want to go a bit more deeply into understanding Lushing, okay? And I know that we've talked about it before, but I want to spend some real time here, because I think this is where most people, even people who are well along the path, have significant blind spots. I include myself in that. I'm learning every day. We're living on what has been called in various esoteric frameworks, a louche farm. I remember a moment last year when I was on the Camino in France. I was walking and at a dinner with a bunch of people, and the topic turned to this kind of, extraction operations happening here on the planet. And they asked me people at the table asked me some questions, and I started talking. And at one moment I noticed, all of these faces kind of staring at me and with kind of their jaws dropped. And one of them said, so basically we're like animals on a farm. And I said, well, yes. And another guy at the table said, boy, you sure are a bring down. He said it good-naturedly. We had a laugh. But I mean, look, we've got to be clear about what's happening here. We've got to understand what it is, or we're never going to be able to extricate ourselves from it fully. It's going to be, let's say, it will be harder on us if we don't understand a bigger picture. And that's what I'm always trying to come back to, is a bigger picture, So a louche farm. Earth is an energy harvesting system. That's not how it was designed. That's not what its original purpose was. That is something that is so spectacular and so awe-inspiring and so amazing that I'd like to devote more time to that in another installment. But that's not what we humans or the earth were designed for. But that is because of our value, we have become in this fallen system an energy harvesting system, right? Our life force, whether you call it Ethereum or prana or chi or life force or source energy, whatever you call it, is the resource that is being extracted. Okay. And of course the planet is being extracted too, because as above, so below, and she's a fractal of us, we're fractals, we're all fractals, right? So everywhere is this kind of extraction, whether it is, physical resources from the earth or energy or, whatever it is an extracted resource. But the essence of what is being extracted every single time is us. It's our life force. It is source energy, right? So most people, when they hear the word louching, if they're familiar with that term, they think of suffering, they think of so-called negative emotions, yes, fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, rage, grief, the constant low grade dread of financial distress, the trauma of war, the horror of ritual abuse and blood sacrifice, and these things that, we've all discovered are very real and still active on the planet. All of these generate enormous quantities of harvestable emotional energy, and the system is absolutely designed to keep those frequencies running as much as possible as a food source, right? As an energy source. And that's why the news cycle looks the way that it does, and that's why the financial stress is structural and endemic and baked into the system rather than accidental. It's not accidental. The nervous system just is kept in a state of chronic stress, chronic threat, and that produces exactly what the system needs. All right. So, but here's the thing that people often miss. And that is that louching is not only about negative emotions. It happens other ways too, okay? It happens through your sexual energy, okay? It happens through what we call worship, okay? Think about that for a moment. The energy of devotional praise and glorification and, bowing before an external concept of God that is separate from you and greater than you. This is an enormous energetic offering. And most of our religious traditions have been, well, I'm not going to say most, all of the religious traditions have been structured precisely to redirect that offering away from source, which we would experience just as natural gratitude and the joy of life and appreciation for our life, and toward an intermediary construct. So I call this a sacrifice implant. I don't know if there really is such a thing, but that's what occurs to me. It's woven into the architecture of organized religion. You are taught that your devotion, your reverence, your most luminous spiritual energy must be poured outward toward an icon or a building or a cube or a name or some being that is positioned above you. And in doing so, you're actually giving away your power, your light, your life force, and that is called, being devout and holy and spiritual. Even in New Age spiritual communities, this pattern is present there too, naturally, right? So-called ascended masters, angelic beings that are actually part of the hierarchical construct of the false light, okay? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't true angelic beings, true source-aligned collectives that represent, what we would call an ascended master, but a lot of what people interact with hasn't been fully vetted, let's say, right? And certain symbols even presented as sacred, certain geometrical forms, certain sigils, certain activation codes that are actually distortions of organic source geometry designed to function as siphons when you direct your energy and attention to them, right? And I mean, you engage with them from a state of openness and reverence and believing that you're connecting to something true, right? And your energy flows out. So we even bliss can be loosed, right? Because that ecstatic spiritual high, when there's a rush, of a powerful ceremony, a group thing, a concert, group activation, it can feel like this profound connection while functioning as a harvesting event. The energy surges and the field opens and something feeds off of that energy. And I think I talked about this during one of these We Need to Talk episodes when I was I went to an ABBA tribute concert during the winter, and I was, watching, more than anything else, watching the audience watch the performers. I wasn't really into the whole event, but I noticed that people were really kind of mesmerized. And I mean, I love ABBA's music, but I was like, why all these ABBA tribute bands all of a sudden making the rounds all over the US and the world? What's this about? So I was observing the audience, and they're out there going, singing and dancing in the aisles and stuff like that. And at one point, and I wasn't really taken in by the performance. It felt really pretty superficial and hollow. But one of the performers at one point says to the audience, "Yeah, give us all your energy." And I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? This is a loosh harvesting festival. Okay, so, I mean, look, this is not to make you or me paranoid about every single spiritual practice you've ever done. It's meant to give us a framework, all right? Because we need a framework for understanding, and we need to be able to ask a question afterward. Do I feel more whole, more sovereign, more empowered after this whatever? Or do I feel subtly empty, like something moved through me and out, right? If you have a crash after an experience like that, I think it's worth asking the question, okay? Real connection to source fills us. It fills you with you. Because because you are, and it is you, source, right? It's not different from you. And it grounds you. It makes you more present. It makes you more alive, right? And aliveness is not the same as stimulation, okay? Aliveness is grounded. It comes from, your heart. It is not the energy of stimulation, okay? And we live in a society and culture that runs on stimulation, right? Stimulation is like empty calories, or, it gives you a temporary sensation, a high, right? It's like coffee, right? Listen, I love coffee. Okay, but it's not the same thing as aliveness, right? So source connection makes you more yourself. It's you experiencing more of you, and there's nothing more fulfilling than that. And that's not ego. And those of you who have felt this, you know what I'm talking about. All right, looshing, even when it feels pleasurable in the moment, leaves a particular kind of depletion or a debt in its wake. All right, so we've got to learn to feel the difference and recognize when our resources are actually being extracted, and sometimes it can be quite subtle, but that discernment alone is already extraordinarily protective. So, okay, I also want to say something about us, about humans, because there has been a very sustained, very deliberate campaign to make us believe that we are the problem. We are the big problem. We are a hostile species. We are a plague on the planet. We are violent by nature. We're incapable of governing ourselves. We are the source of the Earth's suffering, right? This has been a very strong program that we've all been, taught, indoctrinated into, I would say. And we also hear that from the, galactic beings who say, well, you just are not quite ready yet. You guys are in quarantine because you're not advanced enough yet. All right, okay. But I want to be clear. This is not our original nature. This is not who we really are. This is the result of what has been done to us here over eons of time. We have been interfered with genetically. We have been traumatized across millions of years of incarnational cycles. We have been hybridized with the very consciousness of extraction that invaded and has dominated here, so that their patterns of extraction and aggression became part of our behavioral inheritance. The sickness that we see expressed in human civilization, the cruelty, the exploitation, the disease, the destruction, that is not who we are originally. It is the wound. It is the wound. It is the result of what we have been put through here. And it's what happens to a being of light when it is tortured and fragmented and forced to carry the imprint of its oppressors for long enough. And that is also what tells me how powerful we actually are. Look at how much effort has been required to suppress us. The genetic interference, the memory wipes, the reincarnation traps, the fluoride and the food, and the toxicity and the EMF environments and the educational system and the religious frameworks and the financial structures and the media and the astral implants and the timeline manipulations over and over and over and over. All of that sustained, multidimensional, multi-layered, multi-generational effort just to keep one species from remembering who we are. Well, that ought to tell you something. You just don't spend that kind of energy suppressing something that isn't extraordinarily valuable and extraordinarily powerful. So I get a little, my back up a little bit when I hear this narrative about, well, human beings, and we're just, we're a problem, and we're, when we grow up and mature, then maybe we'll be admitted into the galactic community and blah, 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 and we're classified as a hostile species and all that. I don't buy it. I'm not, ignoring the very real fact of what we see and experience on the planet in human form. Not sure they're all human, but that is a result of all of this distortion. The light that we carry, even dimmed, even fragmented, even redirected, even partially hybridized, is significant. Our connection to source, even when it has been disrupted, and it is still that generative. That's why they don't want to let go of this planet. That's why they don't want to let go of us. That is what's being harvested. That is what they have needed. And that means that the moment we remember who we are, the whole equation changes. It's not going to happen for them anymore. And I want to gently acknowledge something here also, because it's territory that, okay, and I just mentioned this a moment ago, and we're not going to go deeply into it today, but when we look at the full picture, it becomes clear that not everyone incarnate on this planet at this time is here with the same origin or the same capacity for source connection. And there are, those, let's say, the number of people who are fully human in the original sense, and then there are others who are not. Okay, and I think the number of actual humans is way, way, way smaller than we think it is. We've got all kinds of beings here. We've got biorobotic consciousness. We've got cloned vessels. We have deeply hybridized lineages that are operating without the full spectrum of human soul essence. And I think it's become pretty clear that, they have been at least the ones who have been running the show, from behind the curtain. And I'm not saying this to create division or fear. I'm just saying it because understanding the landscape helps us to stop being confused why, when certain beings simply don't respond in the way that we expect a human to respond. Empathy is our strength. And I always say this, but every time there's a disaster somewhere, what do humans do? They just they get together, they help each other, they care about each other. We come together. That is our real nature. But when we project our own consciousness and our sense of conscience onto every entity that we encounter, well, that is a vulnerability, and it's a vulnerability that we can't afford anymore, right, at this time. So to bring it back to this simple binary, look, beyond these dimensional realms of, physical matter, the binary doesn't exist anymore. It exists less and less. But here where we are, because all of that I've just described, the astral circus, the looshing spectrum, the campaign against human power, all of it becomes navigable when you hold one clear question, and that is this person, being, transmission, system, is it source aligned? Is it source aligned? Source aligned means it's connected to the generative field of life, okay? Creating rather than consuming. Circulating rather than extracting or hoarding, seeking the highest outcome for all beings everywhere. That is source aligned, right? Not some beings at the expense of other beings. So source aligned means all of that. And not source aligned means operating in some degree of disconnection from that generative field, needing to extract, whether it's energy or attention or devotion or labor or life force or money, right, from external sources in order to sustain itself. This is a very basic binary that we can get good at running things through. Is this source aligned or is it not source aligned? That's the only question that we need to be able to answer. Every piece of information coming at us, every channeler, every whistleblower, every galactic update, every spiritual practice, every symbol, every teacher, run it through that filter. Run it through that filter. And here's what I want to add, because this is important. Source aligned does not mean passive. It does not mean love and light with everyone regardless of what they're doing. It's not spiritual bypass. A consciousness oriented toward the highest good for all understands that strong boundaries are an expression of self-love, of self-respect, and genuine care for the integrity of the field. So you don't just, lie down and let everything walk all over you. That's not what it is. Source aligned understands that discernment sometimes requires us saying, I see what you are. I am aware of what you're doing. I'm seeing how this operates. No, back off, right? And I withdraw my consent and my energy from it. I do not participate. Rebuke, 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 right? That's not judgment. That is clarity. We've been so, well, anyway, that's the New Age psyop, right? So the most loving thing that a being of light can do sometimes is refuse to be loosed, refuse to participate, refuse to consent to that which is not source aligned, right? Refuse to offer devotion to something that is intending to harvest it. And that is sovereignty in practice. In everyday life, we can do this. And we do. And we vote for whether we're going to align with what is source aligned or not through small daily actions. Now, we don't always have, there is a gray area, okay, and honest acknowledgement of that. There is a gray area because not everything falls cleanly into this binary, and we can't always see at first. We can't always determine at first, right? There are beings and collectives and factions that are partially source aligned, working their way towards it, genuinely benevolent in intention, but operating with maybe distorted information or, with agendas that serve some but not all. Not everybody is aware at every level of everything that is going on. That's the reality of it. We've got channelers who are receiving real transmissions from real beings, but maybe their motives, the motives of the beings, are not fully transparent, because when you have been born into and operating inside of a hierarchical system, we don't even sometimes see where our own blindness, and indoctrination makes it hard for us to see what's real, right? We are learning how to be more discerning. That's part of what this whole awakening process is. But, and this is crucial, we also have to be honest about something else. We are still in the land of the relative here. We are still living inside a loosh-based economy, if you will, planetarily speaking. The dominant systems that we were all born into, and we didn't have a choice in the matter, financial, medical, governmental, religious, technological, are all still structured to discourage source alignment, to discourage sovereignty, to make it inconvenient, to sometimes make it feel impossible. That is still the reality that we are navigating. And so this is not about perfection. It's not about purity, it's not about being so rigidly source aligned in your personal life that you become paralyzed or paranoid or unable to function in the world as it currently exists. For me, it's more about intention and orientation and direction towards that, right? And so, you can state your intention to be source aligned. You can do your best within the environment that you're actually in. You can make the clearest choices that you can with the awareness of what you currently have, and extend yourself the same compassion that you would extend to anyone living inside a system that is designed to make sovereignty next to impossible, if not very difficult. Guys, this is what we were born into. This is what we have been dealing with. And when I see the extent of it, I'm just in awe that we are waking up. Anyway, it's all happening. And it's an amazing time to be alive. With all of the decks stacked against humans, it's like, wow. We are doing all of this under interference. So the goal is not perfection. It is just orientation. Which brings me to the point that I want to make underneath all of this when we're talking about discernment is that we have a discernment instrument that no psyop can fully compromise, that as long as we choose to keep it, right, that no amount of information overload can fully silence if you learn to listen to it underneath all of the noise, and that is your body, your heart field, your felt sense of what is true. Okay? The resonance of truth and how we feel it. Because when we're source connected beings, right, we have the capacity to resonate with truth, a sense of truth, right? When you encounter a piece of information, whether it is a channeled message or a disclosure narrative or a spiritual symbol or a teacher, before you analyze it, before you agree or disagree up here in your mind, feel it. Pay attention to what you feel. I mean, it took me, I'm saying all of this because I've been living through it, I mean, it's taken me a long time to start to, tune into that subtle sensation, right? Because there's so much noise on top of it that, I mean, for a long time, I didn't know what I thought or felt about anything, and I had suppressed a lot of the messages that my body was sending me all the time. So, over the years, I got to be more like slowing down, feeling, sensing, and realizing I get friggin' messages all the time. I get them through my body. But they're not like, ah! They don't shout and scream at me. They're just very subtle. And every time I've made a mistake, every time I have been unable to discern, let's say, truth from falsehood, or I haven't been able to discern the subtleties of a situation or the undercurrents in a person or something like that. When I think back to certain moments, I can remember and feel the sensation that my body had that was telling me, careful, pay attention, right? I just didn't know how to recognize it. I didn't know how to honor that, I didn't have enough quiet inside, right, to be able to sense and feel for those very subtle currents sometimes. Now, I know everybody's different. Some people have, their body speaks to them very loudly. Some people have different psychic gifts, developed in different ways, or just, natural gifts. And so everybody, maybe the way that we receive information may be different, but we all receive it, and we can all feel things. We can all feel and sense things. So, when you are encountering information, whatever form it takes, how does it affect your body? Do you feel a sense of expansion or a sense of contraction? Does something in you relax into recognition? Do you feel a sense of relief and goodness in your heart? Or do you feel slightly tightened against intrusion? And it can be very, very subtle. Does the information encounter with the field or whatever it is expand your sense of sovereignty, or does it subtly redirect your energy towards a new external authority? I'll listen to this channel now, and give my power away to this person now, All right, so does what we encounter fill us up? In other words, do we feel more of ourselves coming through, right? Or do we allow more of ourselves through, or does it feel emptying and somehow like there's been a depletion or a debt now, energetically speaking? So look, we don't have to be perfect at this. Our somatic intelligence has been interfered with too. But it is there. It is ours. It is part of our connection to source. And every time we use it, we strengthen it. And that's the practice, right? It's not consuming more information. It's about feeling more clearly. Could not possibly be more important in a time where everything out there is so friggin' loud, and so much information and so much deception and so much psyop and agenda. It's just cuckoo, nutsy cuckoo. But this is, as always, a positive message, because I feel very positive about where we are in this process, even though, I sort of get frustrated by things, I'm like, oh, come on. It's been a really long road here. But the positive message is we don't need to know everything. Okay, and if there's one thing you can take away today is relax. We don't need to know everything. You do not need to know every, or every like galactic history factoid to navigate this moment. You don't need to know the full taxonomy of ET races, or which faction controls which Stargate, or what every symbol actually does. That knowledge will come. And in time, I believe that we will have access to our true history, planetary, galactic, cosmic. That's part of what this lifting of the veil means, right? It's the revelation of what we've forgotten. But we're not there yet, and the good news is we don't need to be. We don't need to be. We have the instrument of discernment within us. And what we need right now is the ability to feel the difference between source aligned and not source aligned. Pretty basic, pretty simple. That's all, right? Between that which seeks the highest good for all, source aligned, and that which extracts, because it's not source aligned. So it doesn't have an intrinsic source rather of energy. That's how it works. That's pretty basic, right? When we're source aligned, we go into this generative paradigm where we access the energy that is us, that is coming from and through us out into the universe, right? Self-generating, self-sustaining, self-sourcing source energy. That is our natural inheritance and birthright as source-aligned beings. When we consciously choose to be source-aligned, that's it, right? When we don't choose that, when we choose other things, and I'm not judging any beings here, everybody. We all have had to go through our process, We all have a very long history in this universe. So I'm not throwing stones. We just need to know the difference. All right. When we turn away from source, we no longer, after so many, compounding choices to separate from source, we just know we're no longer connected. We don't have our intrinsic source of energy anymore. So where are we going to get it? We've got to get it from other people who are source connected. That's it. That's what it breaks down to. I mean, that is the whole toolkit for right now. If you want to understand anything about this world, this solar system, this galaxy, you just understand, okay, well, there's source line and there's not source line in that. That breaks down into all of the factions and the complexity of, geopolitics and exopolitics and galactic factions and all of that stuff, no matter how far back you go. That's really what it boils down to. That's pretty simple, right? And that's enough. That's enough to know. That's enough to hold on to as we navigate this nutsy cuckoo period that I'm so excited we're all here for, because we all chose to be here. So may we all find that simplicity that is buried underneath all of this complexity. May we all trust the instrument of the heart above any external map. Learn to feel again. Recognize when looshing is happening wherever it appears, even when it looks like devotion, even when it feels like bliss. Tricky one, right? Know the difference between stimulation, which is where, looshing, and true inner source connection, right? And let's remember who we really are. And let's hold the wounded and hybridized and suppressed version of ourselves with great tenderness, because it has been through hell. And we're still working out some of that stuff within us, right? That's why we were born into the lineages and into the, carrying what the DNA remembers, right? But that's why the human is so amazing, because we are this infinite, fractal of the source itself, and we have the capacity to metabolize the entirety of our universal journey in this one avatar right here. So valuable, so precious, so amazing. So let's remember who we really are, right? And that the light that has required so much effort for the forces who wanted to prey on it to contain, to control, right? The light is still here. It was never extinguished. It was only waiting for this moment in time, here we all are, to remember itself. And that moment is now. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you for your willingness to listen, to be open. And that's all. I love you all, and I send you all the best until next time. Bye for now.